You write, more technology means better good times, but it also means badder bad times. And the scary thing is, if the good and bad keep exponentially growing, it doesn't matter how great the good times become. If the bad gets to a certain level of bad, it's all over for us. Can you elaborate on this? Why does the bad have that property? That if it's all exponentially getting more powerful, then the bad is going to win in the end. Am I misinterpreting that intuition you
No.
have?
So the first thing is I noticed a trend, which was like the centuries, the good is getting better every century. Like the 20th century was the best century yet in terms of prosperity, in terms of GDP per capita, in terms of life expectancy, in terms of poverty and disease, and every metric that matters. The 20th century was incredible. It also had the biggest wars in history, the biggest genocide in history, the biggest existential threat yet with nuclear weapons, right? The Depression was, probably as big an economic. So it's this interesting thing where the stakes are getting higher in both directions. And so the question is like, if you get enough good, does that protect you against the bad, right? The dream, and I do think this is possible too, is the good gets so good. Have you ever read the Culture series, the Ian Banks books?
Not yet, but I get criticized on a daily basis by some of the mutual folks we know for not having done so.
Well,
and I feel like a lesser man for it. Yes, I need to change.
So that's how I got onto it, and I read 6 of the 10 books, and they're great. But the thing I love about them is like it just paints one of these futuristic societies where the good has gotten so good that the bad is no longer even an issue. Like basically, and the way that this works is the AI, the AIs are benevolent and they control everything. And so like there's one random anecdote where they're like, what happens if you murder someone because there's still people with rage and jealousy or whatever. So someone murders someone. First of all, that person's backed up. So it's like they have to get a new body, and it's annoying, but it's like it's not death. And secondly, that person, what are they going to do? Put him in jail? No. They're just going to send a slap drone around, which is this little like tiny, random drone that just will float around next to them forever. And by the way, kind of be their servant. Like it's kind of fun to have a slap drone, but it's just making sure that they never do anything again. And it's like, I was like, oh man, it could just be, everyone could be so safe. And everything could be so like, you want a house, the AIs will build you a house. There's endless space. There's endless resources. So I do think that could be part of our future. That's part of what excites me is like today would seem like a utopia to Thomas Jefferson, right? Thomas Jefferson's world would seem like a utopia to a caveman. Mm-hmm. There is a future. And by the way, these are happening faster, these jumps, right? So the thing that would seem like a utopia to us, we could experience in our own lifetimes, right? Like it's, especially if, life extension combines with exponential progress. I want to get there. And I think if in that part of what makes it utopia is you don't have to be as scared of the worst bad guy in the world trying to do the worst damage because we have protection. But that said, I'm not sure how that happens. Like it's easier said than done. Nick Bostrom uses the example of if nuclear weapons could be manufactured by microwaving sand, for example, we probably would be in the Stone Age right now because 0.001% of people would love to destroy all of humanity, right? Some 16-year-old with huge mental health problems who right now goes and shoots up a school would say, oh, even better, I'm going to blow up a city. And now suddenly there's copycats, right? And so that's like, as our technology grows, it's going to be easier for the worst bad guys to do tremendous damage. And it's easier to destroy than to build. So it takes a tiny, tiny number of these people with enough power to do bad. So that, to me, I'm like, the stakes are going up because what we have to lose is this incredible utopia, but also like dystopia is real. It happens. The Romans ended up in a dystopia. They probably earlier thought that was never possible. Like we should not get cocky. And so to me, that trend is the exponential tech is a double-edged sword. It's so exciting. I'm happy to be alive now overall because I'm an optimist and I find it exciting, but it's really scary. And the dumbest thing we can do is not be scared. The dumbest thing we can do is get cocky and think, well, my life is always the last couple generations, everything's been fine. Stop that.
What's your gut? What percentage of trajectories take us towards the, as you put, unimaginably good future versus unimaginably bad future? Is it like, are you as an optimist?
It's really hard to know. I mean, one of the things we can do is look at history. And on one hand, there's a lot of stories. I'm actually listening to a great podcast right now called The Fall of Civilizations. And it's literally every episode is like, a little like 2-hour deep dive into some civilization. Some are really famous, like the Roman Empire. Some are more obscure, like the Norse in Greenland.
Mhm.
But each one is so interesting. But there's a lot of civilizations that had their peak. There's always the peak, right? When they're thriving and they're at their max size and they have their waterways and it's civilized and it's representative and it's fair and whatever. Not always, but it's the peak is the great, if I could go back in time, it's not that the farther you go back, the worse it gets. No. You want to go back to a civilization I would go to the Roman Empire in the year 100. Sounds great, right? You don't want to go to the Roman Empire in the year 400.
We might be in the peak right now here, whatever this empire
honestly, I think about like the 80s, the 70s, the 80s.
Oh, here we go. The
90s.
Music.
No, I
so
hate
much
the
better.
80s. No, the 80s culture is so annoying. It's just like when I listen to these things, I'm thinking, the 80s, the 90s, America, the 90s was popular. People forget that now. Like Clinton was a superstar around the world. Michael Jordan was exported internationally. Then basketball was everywhere suddenly. You had like music, the sports, whatever. It was a little probably like the 50s, you coming out of the World War and the Depression before it. It was like this kind of like everyone was in a good mood kind of time, It's like finish a big project and it's Saturday. It was like, I feel like the 50s was kind of like everyone was having it, the 20s, I feel like everyone was in good mood randomly. Then the 30s, everyone was in a bad mood. But the 90s, I think we'll look back on it as a time when everyone was in a good mood. And it was like, again, of course, at the time, it doesn't feel that way necessarily. But I look at that, I'm like, maybe that was kind of America's peak. And like, maybe not, but like, it hasn't been popular since really worldwide. It's gone in and out depending on the country, but like, it hasn't reached that level of like, America's awesome around the world. And the political, situation's gotten, really ugly. And, maybe it's social media, maybe who knows. But I wonder if it'll ever be as simple and positive as it was then. Like maybe we are in the it feels a little like maybe we're in the beginning of the downfall or not. Because these things it's not a perfect smooth hill. It goes up and down and up and down. So maybe there's another big upcoming.
And it's unclear whether public opinion, which is kind of what you're talking to, is correlated strongly with influence. Because you could say that even though America has been on a decline in terms of public opinion, the exporting of technology, that America has still, with all the talk of China, has still been leading the way in terms of AI, in terms of social media, in terms of just basically any software-related product.
Like chips.
Yeah, chips. Yeah. So hardware and software, America leads the way. You could argue that Google and Microsoft and Facebook are no longer American companies; they're international companies, but they really are still at the headquartered in Silicon Valley, broadly speaking. So, and Tesla, of course, and just all of the technological innovation still seems to be happening in the United States, although culturally and politically, this is not
good.
Well, maybe that could shift at any moment when all that technological development can actually create some positive impact in the world.
Yeah.
That can shift it with the right leadership and so on, with the right messaging.
Yeah, I think I don't feel confident at all about whether. No, I don't mean that. I don't feel confident in my opinion that we may be on the downswing or that we may be, because I truly don't know. It's like, I think the people, these are really big macro stories that are really hard to see when you're inside of them. It's like being on a beach and running around, a few miles this way and trying to suss out the shape of the coastline. Like, it's just really hard to see the big picture. You get caught up in the micro stories, the little tiny, ups and downs that are part of some bigger trend. And also giant paradigm shifts happen quickly nowadays. The internet, came out of nowhere and suddenly was like, changed everything. So there could be a changed everything thing on the way. It seems like there's a few candidates for it. And like, but I mean, it feels like the stakes are just higher than it even was for the Romans, higher than it was because that we're more powerful as a species. We have godlike powers with technology that other civilizations at their peak didn't have. And so
I wonder if those high stakes and powers will feel laughable to people that live, humans, aliens, cyborgs, whatever lives 100 years from now. That maybe our little like this feeling of political and technological turmoil is nothing compared
Well,
to
that's
what's to
the big
come.
question. You could so right now, the 1890s was like a super politically contentious decade in the U.S. It was like immense tribalism, and the newspapers were all like lying and telling. There was a lot of like what we would associate with today's media, the worst of it, and it was over gold or silver being this. I don't know. It's something that I don't understand. But the point is,
Yeah.
it was a little bit of a blip, right? It happened. It must have felt like the end of days at the time, and then now and most people don't even know about that. Versus, again, the Roman Empire actually collapsed. And so the question is just like, will in 50 years, will this be like McCarthyism? Oh, they had that was like a crazy few years in America and then it was fine. Or is this the beginning of something really big? And that's what I don't know.
Well, I wonder if we can predict what the big thing is at the beginning. It feels like we're not. We're just here along for the ride, and at the local level and at every level, are trying to do our best.
Well,
But
and,
we're
and
all
how do we
just
do our best? That's the one thing I know for sure is that we need to have our wits about us and do our best. And the way that we can do that, we have to be as wise as possible, right? To proceed forward. And wisdom is an emergent property of discourse.
So you're a proponent of wisdom versus stupidity, because you can make I can steel man the case for stupidity.
Do it.
I probably can't, but there's some. I think wisdom, and you talk about this, can come with a false confidence, arrogance. I mean, you talk about this in the book. That's too easy.
That's not wisdom then. If you're being arrogant, you're being unwise.
Unwise.
Yeah, I think wisdom is doing what people 100 years from now, with the hindsight that we don't have, would do if they could come back in time and they knew everything. It's like, how do we figure out how to have hindsight when we actually are not?
What if stupidity is the thing that people from 100 years from now will see as wise? Like,
I mean,
The Idiot by Dostoevsky, being naive and trusting everybody. Maybe that's
then you get
one.
lucky. Then then maybe you get to a good future by stumbling upon it. But ideally, you can get there. Like, I think a lot of America, the great things about it are a product of the wisdom of previous Americans. The Constitution was a pretty wise system to set up.
There's not much stupid stumbling around. Well, there is. I mean, with Dostoevsky's The Idiot, Prince Mishkin, and Brothers Karamazov, there's Alyosha Karamazov. You err on the side of love and almost like a naive trust in other human beings. And that turns out to be, at least in my perspective, in the long term, for the success of the species, is actually wisdom.
It's a compass.
But we don't know. It's a good
compass when you're in the fog.
In the fog.
It's a compass. Yeah.
Love is a compass.
Okay, but here's the thing. So I think we should have a compass is nice, but you know what else is nice? Is a flashlight in the fog that can help. You can't see that far, but you can see 4 feet ahead instead of 1 foot. And that to me is discourse. That is open, vigorous, like discussion in a culture that fosters that, is how the species, how the American citizens as a unit can be as wise as possible, can maybe see 4 feet ahead instead of 1 foot ahead.
That said, Charles Bukowski said that love is a fog that fades with the first light of reality. So I don't know how that works out, but I feel like there's intermixing of metaphors that works.